I can see so much of her in you, you know, the way you carry yourself, the intelligence in your eyes, that quiet strength. But I'm also seeing something that worries me. Maya looked up sharply. What do you mean? Mrs. Patterson leaned forward slightly. There are rumors going around about an incident yesterday, something involving you and some older students. I don't know all the details, but I want you to know that if something happened, if someone was bothering you or making you feel unsafe, you can talk to me. Maya's throat felt tight. Part of her wanted to tell Mrs. Patterson everything. About the bullying, about the warehouse, about how angry she'd felt when Jake mocked her mother's memory. But another part of her, the part that was growing stronger every day, knew that adults would just try to fix things in ways that would make everything worse. Nothing happened, Maya said carefully. Just some kids being kids. Mrs. Patterson nodded slowly. But Maya could see she wasn't convinced. Maya, I need you to understand something important. Your mother's strength came from many places. Her training, yes, but also her compassion, her judgment, her ability to know when to fight and when to find another way. Strength without wisdom can be dangerous, especially for someone your age. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Was Mrs. Patterson saying she lacked wisdom? That she wasn't handling things the right way? I know you're trying to honor your mother's memory, Mrs. Patterson continued, but the best way to do that isn't by becoming someone she wouldn't recognize. Your mother would want you to be safe, to be happy, to find healthy ways to deal with your grief and anger. Maya stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need to get to my next class. Maya, wait. But Maya was already walking toward the door, her jaw set and her eyes burning. Adults always thought they knew what was best, always thought they understood what it was like to lose everything that mattered. But Mrs. Patterson still had her family intact, still went home to a husband and children who were alive and present. She couldn't possibly understand what Maya was going through. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of stares and whispers. Maya ate lunch alone, picking at her sandwich while conversation swirled around her. She caught fragments of stories that were growing more elaborate with each telling. Some said she'd shot Jake Morrison 20 times, others claimed she'd made him beg for mercy, a few insisted she'd threatened to bring real guns to school. None of them were true, but Maya didn't correct them. Let them think what they wanted. Let them be afraid if that's what it took to leave her alone. It was during fifth period math class that Maya's world shifted again. The classroom door opened, and Principal Henderson walked in with a man Maya recognized immediately. Colonel Morrison, Jake's father, and one of the highest-ranking officers on the base. Miss Singh, Principal Henderson said formally, please gather your things and come with us. Maya's blood went cold. She could feel every eye in the classroom on her as she packed her backpack slowly, buying time to think. Colonel Morrison stood near the door, his expression unreadable but his posture rigid with military authority. Maya had seen him at base functions, always perfectly pressed and polished, always surrounded by other officers who hung on his every word. The walk to the principal's office felt endless. Maya's sneakers squeaked against the polished floor and she could hear the muffled sounds of classes continuing behind closed doors. Normal life proceeding while hers potentially fell apart. Principal Henderson's office was cramped and overly warm, with motivational posters covering the walls and the smell of stale coffee hanging in the air. Maya took the chair directly across from the principal's desk, while Colonel Morrison remained standing near the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Maya, Principal Henderson began, his voice gentler than she'd expected, we need to discuss what happened yesterday afternoon. Maya kept her expression neutral, the way she'd practiced in the mirror that morning. I don't know what you mean. Colonel Morrison turned from the window, his pale blue eyes fixing on her with laser focus. Young lady, my son came home yesterday with some very disturbing allegations. He claims you threatened him and his friends with a weapon. An airsoft gun isn't a weapon, Maya said carefully. It's a training tool. Ah. Colonel Morrison's voice held a note of satisfaction, like he'd caught her in a trap. So you admit you were armed during this encounter? Maya realized her mistake immediately, but it was too late to take it back. I was practicing target shooting in an abandoned warehouse. It's perfectly legal. Legal, perhaps, Principal Henderson said, but pointing any kind of gun, even a toy, at another student is absolutely unacceptable. That's assault. Maya, it's grounds for expulsion and potentially criminal charges. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to stay calm. Jake Morrison and his friends were trespassing. They were harassing me and making threats. I was defending myself. Colonel Morrison's face darkened. My son says you shot him multiple times without provocation. He says you threatened to escalate if he didn't leave you alone. That sounds like terrorism to me, not self-defense. Terrorism? Maya couldn't keep the disbelief out of her voice. For using an airsoft gun in self-defense? For threatening other students with what appeared to be a real weapon, Principal Henderson clarified. Maya, I understand you've been through a tremendous loss, and everyone on this base has sympathy for what you're dealing with. But that doesn't give you the right to take your anger out on other children. Maya felt something hot and sharp building in her chest. Other children? Jake Morrison is 17 years old and twice my size. He's been bullying me for months, calling me names, pushing me around, and no one has done anything about it. The moment I stand up for myself, suddenly I'm the problem. Standing up for yourself is one thing, Colonel Morrison said coldly. Bringing weapons to settle disputes is something else entirely. Where was this concern for student safety when your son was terrorizing me? Maya shot back, her mother's steel creeping into her voice. Where were these conversations about appropriate behavior when he was calling me an orphan and making jokes about my mother's death? Principal Henderson and Colonel Morrison exchanged a look that Maya didn't miss. She could see them reassessing the situation, realizing there might be more to the story than Jake had told them. That's a serious allegation, Maya, Principal Henderson said slowly. If Jake has been bullying you, you should have reported it through proper channels. I did, Maya lied smoothly. I told 3 different teachers about the harassment. Nothing happened. Jake's father is a colonel, and my father is just a staff sergeant. Everyone knows how these things work on base. Colonel Morrison's jaw tightened. Are you suggesting that rank influences how disciplinary matters are handled in our schools? I'm suggesting that some students get more protection than others, Maya replied, meeting his gaze directly. And some students have to learn to protect themselves. The office fell silent, except for the ticking of the wall clock. Maya could see both men struggling with how to handle the situation. If she'd been just another military brat making trouble, they could have expelled her and moved on. But she was Captain Priya Singh's daughter, and Priya had been respected and well-liked throughout the base community. Punishing her harshly would raise uncomfortable questions about how the daughter of a fallen hero was being treated. Maya, Principal Henderson said finally, regardless of what may or may not have happened before yesterday, bringing any kind of weapon to settle a dispute is unacceptable. I'm going to have to suspend you for 3 days, and there will need to be a formal review of your enrollment status. And I'll be recommending that you undergo psychological evaluation, Colonel Morrison added. Any child who threatens other students needs professional help. Maya stood up slowly, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. Is my father being notified? He's being called now. Principal Henderson confirmed. He should be here within the hour to collect you. Maya nodded and walked toward the door, but Colonel Morrison's voice stopped her. Miss Singh, he said, his tone carrying all the authority of his rank. I want to be very clear about something. If you ever threaten my son or any other student again, I will personally ensure that you and your father are removed from this base permanently. Do I make myself understood? Maya turned to face him, and for a moment, something flickered across her features that made both men take an involuntary step back. It was her mother's expression, calm, controlled, and absolutely lethal. Colonel Morrison, Maya said quietly, I understand perfectly. But I want you to understand something too. My mother died serving this country and protecting people like your son. I won't dishonor her memory by letting bullies think they can abuse me without consequences. If Jake leaves me alone, I'll leave him alone. But if he doesn't, she paused, letting her words hang in the air. Well, I guess we'll see how good Ghost's daughter really is. Maya walked out of the office before either man could respond, leaving them staring after her with expressions of shock and growing concern. In the hallway, she pulled out her phone and sent a text to her father. Got suspended. Will explain everything. Coming home now. As she walked toward the main entrance, Maya felt strangely calm. She'd crossed a line today. She knew that. There would be consequences, difficult conversations, possibly worse. But for the first time since her mother's death, she felt like she was in control of her own story. The warehouse would be waiting for her when she got home. Her mother's journal would be there too, full of wisdom about precision, patience, and picking your battles carefully. Maya had a lot to learn, but she was no longer just a grieving child being pushed around by people who thought she was helpless. She was Ghost's daughter, and it was time everyone understood what that really meant. Outside the school, Maya could see her father's truck pulling into the parking lot, dust trailing behind it. Staff Sergeant David Singh looked older than his 38 years, his face lined with grief and stress, his once perfect military posture now slightly stooped with the weight of single parenthood. Maya took a deep breath and walked toward the truck, ready for the conversation that would change everything between them. It was time to stop pretending she was fine, time to stop hiding who she was becoming. Her father deserved the truth, even if it scared him. As she climbed into the passenger seat, Maya caught her reflection in the side mirror. For just a moment, she looked exactly like her mother, determined, focused, and absolutely uncompromising. The resemblance didn't scare her anymore. It made her proud. "Hello, Dad," she said as he put the truck in drive. "We need to talk." The drive home passed in tense silence, broken only by the hum of the truck's engine and the distant sounds of base life continuing around them. Maya watched her father's knuckles whiten on the steering wheel, saw the muscle in his jaw twitch the way it did when he was trying to control his emotions. Staff Sergeant David Singh had always been a man of few words, but since Priya's death, he'd become almost completely silent at home. When they pulled into their driveway, David sat for a moment without turning off the engine, staring at the small house that had once been filled with laughter and warmth. Now it felt like a museum of their former life, preserved but no longer lived in. "Inside," he said finally, his voice rougher than usual. "We'll talk inside." Maya followed her father through the front door, past the pictures on the hallway wall that neither of them looked at anymore. The living room felt suffocating with its carefully maintained perfection. Priya's magazine still on the coffee table, her reading glasses still on the side table, her favorite throw pillow still positioned exactly where she'd left it the morning of her final mission. David sank into his recliner, the same spot where he'd spent countless evenings watching the news, while Priya helped Maya with homework on the couch. Now he just sat there, looking at his daughter with a mixture of concern and something that might have been fear. "Principal Henderson says you threatened other students with a weapon," David began without preamble. "He says you've been suspended pending a psychological evaluation." Maya remained standing near the doorway, her backpack still slung over her shoulder. "That's what he says." "That's not an answer, Maya. What happened?" Maya studied her father's face, seeing the exhaustion etched into every line. David had been working double shifts for months, anything to avoid spending too much time in this house full of memories. He'd been so focused on his own grief that he'd barely noticed how she was struggling, how she was changing, how she was learning to survive without the mother who'd been her anchor. "Jake Morrison and his friends have been bullying me since Mom's funeral," Maya said bluntly. "Calling me names, pushing me around, making jokes about Mom being dead. Yesterday they followed me to a place where I go to practice shooting." David's eyebrows rose slightly. "Practice shooting?" Maya unzipped her backpack and pulled out the airsoft pistol, placing it carefully on the coffee table between them. David stared at it like it was a live cobra, his face going pale. "That's your mother's training gun," he whispered. "I found it in her equipment bag, along with her journal and all her competition notes. I've been teaching myself everything she tried to show me before she died." David reached for the gun with shaking hands, turning it over slowly. Maya could see recognition in his eyes, memories of watching Priya clean and maintain this same weapon after countless hours of practice. "Maya, why didn't you tell me you were being bullied? Why didn't you come to me for help?" Maya felt a laugh bubble up in her throat, but it came out sounding more like a sob. "When, Dad? When you leave for work at 5 in the morning? When you come home at 8 at night and go straight to your room? When you volunteer for weekend duty so you don't have to spend time here with me?" David flinched as if she'd slapped him. That's not, I'm working extra to provide for us, to make sure we're financially secure. We were already financially secure, Maya shot back. Mom's life insurance, her military benefits, the base housing allowance. You're working extra because you can't stand being around anything that reminds you of her, including me. The words hung in the air between them, more honest than any conversation they'd had since the funeral. David's shoulders sagged, and Maya saw her father's carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. You look so much like her, David said quietly. Especially when you're angry. It's like having a ghost in the house. I'm not a ghost, Dad. I'm your daughter. And I'm still here, still alive, still needing you to actually be my father instead of just my provider. David set the airsoft gun down carefully, his hands still trembling slightly. Tell me what happened yesterday, all of it. Maya sat down on the couch, finally setting her backpack aside. For the next 20 minutes, she told her father everything. About finding the warehouse, about practicing with her mother's equipment, about the months of harassment from Jake Morrison, about the confrontation and how it had ended. She told him about the precision of her shots, about the feeling of channeling her mother's skills, about the pride she'd felt in finally standing up for herself. When she finished, David was quiet for a long time, processing everything she'd shared. Finally, he looked up at her with an expression she hadn't seen since before Priya's death. Focused attention, genuine concern, and something that might have been respect. Your mother would have been proud of your shooting, he said slowly. But she would have been worried about everything else. What do you mean? David leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Maya, your mother's strength came from more than just her ability to hit targets. She was disciplined, strategic, careful about when and how she used force. She understood that being able to hurt someone doesn't mean you should. Maya felt her defenses rising. I didn't hurt anyone. I was defending myself. You humiliated 3 boys in front of each other, used superior skill to make them feel helpless and afraid. That's not defense, Maya. That's dominance. Maya started to argue, but David held up a hand. I'm not saying they didn't deserve it, he continued. Bullies need to face consequences for their actions. But the way you handled it has created new problems. Now you're suspended, under investigation, and Colonel Morrison is looking for any excuse to make our lives difficult. So what was I supposed to do? Just let them keep hurting me? David stood up and walked to the mantel, stopping in front of a framed photo of Priya in her dress uniform. You were supposed to come to me. You were supposed to trust that I would protect you and handle the situation appropriately. Like how you've been handling everything else since Mom died? The words came out sharper than Maya intended, but she didn't take them back. David turned to face her, and for the first time in months, she saw real emotion in his eyes. Pain, anger, and a deep, aching sadness. You think I don't know I've been failing you? David asked quietly. You think I don't lie awake at night knowing that Priya would be furious with how I've been handling things? Maya felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Then why haven't you done anything about it? Because I don't know how, David admitted, his voice breaking slightly. Your mother was the strong one, the one who always knew what to do. She was the parent who handled discipline and emotional problems and school issues. I fixed things around the house and helped with math homework and grilled burgers on weekends. I was the fun parent, not the responsible one. Maya stared at her father, seeing him clearly for the first time in months. He wasn't just grieving his wife, he was drowning in responsibilities he'd never had to handle alone, paralyzed by the fear of making wrong decisions that could damage his daughter even more. Dad, Maya said softly, I don't need you to be Mom. I need you to be you, but present. Here, paying attention to what's happening in my life. David nodded slowly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I've been a coward, hiding at work, avoiding this house, leaving you to deal with everything alone. That stops now. Maya felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she'd been carrying for months without realizing it. What happens next? With school? With the suspension? With Colonel Morrison? David straightened his shoulders, and Maya caught a glimpse of the soldier he'd been before grief had broken him down. Next, we handle this together, like we should have been doing all along. Over the next hour, Father and daughter developed a plan. David would meet with Principal Henderson and Colonel Morrison, presenting a united front and ensuring that Jake Morrison's bullying behavior became part of the official record. Maya would attend the required psychological evaluation, but David would make sure it was with Dr. Shepley, Sarah Chen, the base psychologist who'd known and respected Priya. More importantly, David would arrange for Maya to receive proper firearms training through the base youth program. If she was going to honor her mother's memory by developing marksmanship skills, she would do it safely, legally, and under proper supervision. But the warehouse stops, David said firmly. No more practicing alone, no more carrying weapons to settle disputes. If you want to learn to shoot like your mother, you'll do it the right way. Maya nodded, understanding that this was non-negotiable. And the bullying will be handled through proper channels. But Maya, if someone threatens you or puts their hands on you, you defend yourself. Your mother would never expect you to be a victim. That evening, David cooked dinner for the first time since Priya's death. Nothing fancy, just grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, but they ate together at the kitchen table instead of in separate rooms with the television on. They talked about school, about Maya's friends, about the shooting competition that was coming up in 6 weeks. "Do you think I could enter?" Maya asked tentatively. "The junior division?" David considered this carefully. "If Dr. Chen clears you psychologically, and if you complete the safety training program, then yes, your mother would want you to compete." Maya felt a surge of excitement that was quickly followed by nervous uncertainty. What if I'm not good enough? What if I embarrass her memory? David reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Maya, your ghost's daughter. You've got her steady hands, her competitive spirit, and her refusal to back down from challenges. But more than that, you've got something she was still learning at your age. The knowledge that true strength comes from knowing when to fight and when to find another way." 2 weeks later, Maya returned to school after completing her suspension and psychological evaluation. Dr. Chen had been impressed by Maya's emotional resilience and had recommended that she continue with supervised firearms training as a positive outlet for her grief and anger. The atmosphere at school had changed. Jake Morrison and his friends kept their distance, but it wasn't fear that motivated them now. It was respect. Word had spread about the evaluation results, about Maya's acceptance into the youth marksmanship program, about her father's newfound involvement in addressing the bullying problem. Principal Henderson had called a school assembly about bullying and conflict resolution, using Maya's situation as a teachable moment without naming her directly. The message was clear. Harassment would not be tolerated, but vigilante justice wasn't acceptable either. Maya walked through the hallways differently now. She still carried herself with quiet confidence, but it was tempered by wisdom and the knowledge that she wasn't alone anymore. Her father picked her up from school every day, and they spent evenings working on homework together or practicing at the base shooting range under the supervision of Sergeant Major Williams, one of Priya's former colleagues. The warehouse remained empty, its broken windows and concrete walls holding only memories of anger and grief. Maya had returned once to clean up the evidence of her secret practice sessions, but she felt no nostalgia for the place. It had served its purpose during the darkest period of her life, but she'd outgrown the need to hide. 6 weeks after the suspension, Maya stood on the firing line at the regional junior marksmanship competition, wearing her mother's lucky bracelet and feeling Priya's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. David watched from the spectator area, his chest swelling with pride as Maya's shots grouped tightly around the center of her target. She didn't win that first competition. Second place in her age group was still an impressive showing for someone so new to formal competition. But as Maya accepted her medal, she felt something she hadn't experienced since her mother's death: genuine happiness. That night, David helped her hang the medal on the wall next to Priya's trophies, creating a new section for Maya's achievements. They stood together looking at the display, father and daughter united in their determination to honor Priya's memory while building their own future. "She would be so proud," David said softly. Maya nodded, thinking of her mother's journal entry about confidence coming from competence. "I think she knew I'd figure it out eventually." "We both did," David corrected. "We both figured it out." Maya smiled, leaning against her father's shoulder. "Yeah, we did." Outside their window, the base was quiet except for the distant sound of evening retreat being played over the loudspeakers. It was a sound that had marked the end of countless days in their old life, and now it marked the beginning of something new, a life where Maya was no longer just the daughter of a ghost, but a young woman learning to honor her mother's legacy while writing her own story. The airsoft gun remained in David's closet, retired from active duty but kept as a reminder of the months when Maya had learned to protect herself. She didn't need it anymore. Didn't need to prove her strength through displays of force or dominance over others who underestimated her. Maya had learned the most important lesson her mother had tried to teach her. True strength wasn't about never missing your target. It was about knowing when to take the shot, when to hold your fire, and when to find another way entirely. She was Ghost's daughter, but she was also David Singh's daughter, and most importantly, she was Maya Singh, a young woman with her own path to walk, her own targets to hit, and her own legacy to build. The mocking voice that had once asked, "Seriously, kid?" was just a memory now, silenced by the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was capable of achieving. Maya had shown them all what Ghost's daughter could do when pushed too far. Now she was ready to show them what she could accomplish when she chose her battles wisely and fought them on her own terms. The morning sun cast long shadows across the abandoned warehouse where 12-year-old Maya Singh practiced her shooting stance. Her small hands gripped the modified airsoft pistol her father had given her, the weight feeling both familiar and strange. She'd been coming here every day for 3 months now, ever since the accident that changed everything. "Focus on your breathing, Beta," she whispered to herself, repeating the words her mother used to say. "Inhale, hold, exhale on the shot." The words felt hollow in the empty space, but they were all she had left of Captain Priya Singh, the woman everyone in their military base had called Ghost for her uncanny ability to hit impossible targets. Maya squeezed the trigger, watching the plastic pellet strike just outside the center ring she'd drawn on the concrete wall. Close, but not close enough. Never close enough. She lowered the gun and wiped sweat from her forehead, her dark hair sticking to her skin in the humid warehouse air. 3 months ago, life had been different. 3 months ago, she'd had a mother who came home every evening with stories from the base, who taught her math homework at the kitchen table, who tucked her into bed with promises that everything would be okay. 3 months ago, she'd been just another army brat living on the base with her parents, complaining about having to move schools again when her father got reassigned. Then came the mission that went wrong, the helicopter that didn't come back, the officers at the door with their pressed uniforms and carefully rehearsed condolences, the funeral with full military honors that felt like watching someone else's life fall apart. Now it was just Maya and her father, Staff Sergeant David Singh, and the suffocating weight of a house that felt too big and too quiet. David had thrown himself into work, taking extra shifts and volunteering for assignments that kept him away from home. When he was there, he moved through the rooms like a ghost himself, avoiding the framed photos on the mantel, the half-finished craft projects on the dining table, the shooting trophies that lined the hallway. Maya understood why he couldn't look at those trophies. Each one represented a competition where her mother had dominated, where Priya Singh had shown up the men who thought a woman couldn't outshoot them. Maya had been at most of those competitions, cheering from the sidelines, watching her mother's steady hands and unwavering focus turn skeptics into believers. "She made it look so easy," Maya muttered, raising the airsoft gun again. She'd found it in her mother's equipment bag, along with training manuals, competition schedules, and a journal filled with shooting tips and observations. The journal had become Maya's Bible, her connection to the woman who'd taught her that strength came in many forms. The warehouse had been Maya's discovery, a place where she could practice without her father knowing. She didn't think he'd approve. He'd become overprotective since the accident, driving her to and from school, calling to check on her during his lunch breaks, hovering whenever she did anything that reminded him of Priya. The shooting would definitely remind him of Priya. Maya lined up another shot, remembering her mother's advice about stands and grip. The pellet hit closer to center this time, and she felt a small surge of satisfaction. Progress was slow, but it was progress. She'd started coming here after overhearing a conversation between her father and his commanding officer. They'd been discussing her future, where she'd live if David got deployed overseas, whether she should stay with her grandparents in Punjab or with David's sister in California. They talked about her like she was a problem to be solved, a burden to be managed now that the capable parent was gone. That night, Maya had made a decision. She wouldn't be anyone's burden. She would learn to be strong like her mother, independent and capable. She would master the skills Priya had tried to teach her before the mission that changed everything. And maybe, if she got good enough, she could honor her mother's memory in a way that would make David proud instead of sad. The sound of footsteps outside the warehouse made Maya freeze. She quickly stuffed the airsoft gun into her backpack and crept toward one of the broken windows. Through the grimy glass, she saw 3 figures approaching, teenagers from the local high school. Based on their leather jackets and confident swagger, Maya recognized the leader immediately. Jake Morrison, 17 years old, son of Colonel Morrison, and the biggest bully on the base. He'd made her life miserable since the funeral, making cruel jokes about her mother's death, calling her orphan girl in the hallways, pushing her around when no adults were watching. The 2 boys with him were his usual followers, Ryan and Marcus, who laughed at Jake's jokes and joined in his harassment whenever they thought they could get away with it. "I'm telling you, someone's been using this place," Jake was saying as they approached the warehouse door. "I saw footprints in the dirt yesterday, and there's definitely been someone here recently." Maya's heart pounded as she looked for another way out. The main door was the only real exit, but there were some broken windows on the far side of the building that might be big enough to crawl through. She grabbed her backpack and started moving as quietly as possible toward the back of the warehouse. "Probably some homeless person," Marcus said with disgust. "This whole area is getting worse since they closed down the old factory." "Or maybe it's some kid playing soldier," Ryan suggested with a sneer. "You know how these military brats are, always pretending they're tough like their parents." Maya froze at those words, anger flaring in her chest. These boys knew nothing about being military kids, nothing about the sacrifices their families made, nothing about the strength it took to keep moving when your world fell apart. Jake's father was an officer who spent most of his time behind a desk pushing papers and attending meetings. He'd never seen real combat, never put his life on the line like Maya's mother had. The warehouse door creaked open, and Jake's voice echoed in the empty space. "Hello? Anyone in here?" His tone was mocking, like he was calling to a dog. Come out, wherever you are." Maya crouched behind a stack of old crates, trying to control her breathing. She could hear their footsteps spreading out as they searched the warehouse, their voices getting closer to her hiding spot. "Look at this," Ryan called out, and Maya's blood went cold. She turned to see him holding one of the plastic pellets she'd been using for target practice. "Someone's definitely been shooting in here." "What kind of shooting?" "Looks like airsoft pellets," Marcus observed, picking up another one. "Someone's been playing war games." Jake laughed, a sound with no warmth in it. "Military brat for sure. Probably thinks they're going to grow up to be some kind of hero like mommy or daddy."
Maya's hands clenched into fists.
She thought about her mother's journal, about all the advice about staying calm under pressure, about not letting emotions control your actions, but the rage building in her chest was getting harder to contain. "Check behind those crates," Jake ordered his friends. "I want to know who's been using our hangout spot." Maya knew she was caught. There was nowhere else to hide, and they were going to find her in seconds. She could try to run, but Jake and his friends were bigger and faster than her. She could lie and claim she'd just found this place, but the evidence of her practice sessions was scattered around the warehouse. Or she could stand up and face them. Maya took a deep breath, thinking of her mother's steady hands and unwavering confidence. She stood up slowly, stepping out from behind the crates with her chin raised and her shoulders back. Well, Jake said with a nasty grin. "Look what we have here. If it isn't the little orphan girl." Maya felt the familiar sting of that word, but she kept her expression neutral. "This isn't your hangout spot, Jake. It's public property." "Public property?" Jake laughed and his friends joined in. "Listen to her. Acting all tough, you think because your mommy was some kind of soldier that makes you special?" "My mother was Captain Priya Singh," Maya said quietly. She was one of the best marksmen in the entire army, was being the key word. Jake said cruelly, "Now she's just dead, and you're just another military brat with no friends and no future." The rage that had been building in Maya's chest exploded. "Don't you dare talk about my mother like that." "Oh, what are you going to do about it?" Jake stepped closer, towering over her. You going to shoot me? With what, your little toy gun? He'd spotted her backpack and correctly guessed what was inside. Maya's hand moved instinctively toward her backpack, but she stopped herself. Violence wouldn't solve anything, and it would just give Jake more ammunition to use against her. But the mockery in his voice, the casual way he dismissed her mother's sacrifice, made her want to prove him wrong in the most direct way possible. That's what I thought, Jake said with satisfaction. All talk, no action, just like all you military kids. You think having a parent in uniform makes you special, but when it comes down to it, you're just scared little kids playing dress-up. You don't know anything about military families, Maya said through gritted teeth. I know enough, Jake shot back. I know your mom got herself killed on some stupid mission, and now you're stuck with a dad who can't even look at you without crying. Maya's vision went red. She'd heard enough cruelty, enough dismissal of everything her family had sacrificed. Without thinking, she reached into her backpack and pulled out the airsoft gun, pointing it directly at Jake's chest. Seriously, kid? Jake mocked, not showing an ounce of fear. You're going to threaten me with a toy gun? What are you, 8 years old? His friends laughed nervously, but Jake just smiled wider. Go ahead, shoot. Show us what the great Captain Singh's daughter can do. Bet you can't hit the broadside of a barn. Maya's hands were steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She adjusted her grip exactly the way her mother had taught her, found her stance, controlled her breathing. The warehouse went silent except for the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears. This is pathetic, Jake continued, his voice dripping with contempt. Your mother's probably rolling over in her grave watching her daughter play with toys and pretend to be tough. Maya's finger moved to the trigger, her training taking over. In that moment, she wasn't a 12-year-old girl being bullied by teenagers. She was Captain Priya Singh's daughter, carrying on a legacy of precision and strength. The airsoft pellet struck Jake square in the center of his chest with a sharp crack. He staggered backward, more from surprise than pain, his eyes wide with shock. What the hell? Ryan gasped, but Maya wasn't done. She adjusted her aim and fired again, this time hitting the letter on Jake's jacket with perfect accuracy. Then again, striking Marcus in the shoulder when he tried to move toward her. And again, catching Ryan in the leg as he attempted to flank her. Each shot was deliberate, controlled, precise. Maya moved like her mother had at competitions, smooth and confident, never wasting a motion or missing a target. The months of practice in this warehouse had paid off, but more than that, something deeper had awakened in her, the genetic gift that had made Priya Singh legendary. Stop! Jake yelled, holding up his hands. Stop shooting! But Maya was in the zone now, that state of perfect focus her mother had described in her journal. She could see every target, calculate every trajectory, control every variable. She fired 3 more shots in rapid succession each, one hitting exactly where she intended, forming a tight pattern around Jake's feet that made him dance backward in panic. Please, Marcus shouted. We're sorry. We're sorry. Maya lowered the gun slowly, her breathing still controlled, her hands still steady. The 3 bullies stared at her with a mixture of fear and disbelief, no longer seeing a helpless little girl, but something much more dangerous. My mother, Maya said quietly, was called Ghost because she never missed, not once in her entire career. She looked directly at Jake, her dark eyes steady and calm. I've been practicing every day since she died, learning everything she tried to teach me. Jake opened his mouth, but no words came out. You want to know what I learned? Maya continued, her voice growing stronger. I learned that strength isn't about being the biggest or the loudest. It's about precision. It's about control. It's about hitting your target when it matters most. She slipped the airsoft gun back into her backpack, her movements casual and confident. This is where I practice, where I honor my mother's memory. If you ever come here again, if you ever bother me again, if you ever speak about my mother with anything less than respect, she paused, letting the implications hang in the air. You'll find out just how good Ghost's daughter really is. The 3 boys fled the warehouse without another word, stumbling over each other in their haste to get away. Maya watched them go, feeling something she hadn't felt since the day her mother died, pride. She looked around the warehouse, seeing it differently now. This wasn't just a hiding place anymore. It was her training ground, her sanctuary, the place where she was becoming who she was meant to be. Maya pulled out her mother's journal and opened to a page she'd read dozens of times. Confidence comes from competence. Master your skills, trust your training, and never let anyone make you doubt what you're capable of achieving. For the first time since the funeral, Maya smiled. She had work to do. Word traveled fast on a military base, especially when it involved the colonel's son getting outshot by a 12-year-old girl. By the time Maya walked into school the next morning, whispers followed her down the hallways like shadows. Some students looked at her with newfound respect, others with fear, and a few with the kind of curiosity reserved for dangerous animals in cages. Maya kept her head high and her expression neutral, just like her mother had taught her. She could feel the stares, hear the fragments of conversations that stopped when she passed. "Did you hear what happened? Jake Morrison got schooled by Singh's kid. I heard she's some kind of shooting prodigy." The attention made her uncomfortable, but it was better than being invisible. For months after her mother's death, Maya had felt like a ghost herself, floating through classes and meals without anyone really seeing her. Now they saw her whether she wanted them to or not. Her first class was American history with Mrs. Patterson, a kind woman who'd been extra gentle with Maya since the funeral. As Maya took her seat in the back row, she noticed Jake Morrison wasn't in his usual spot near the front. In fact, he wasn't in class at all. "Maya?" Mrs. Patterson's voice cut through her thoughts. "Could you stay after class for a moment?" Maya nodded, her stomach tightening. She'd been expecting this conversation, though she'd hoped to avoid it a little longer. As the other students filed out, talking in hushed tones and stealing glances at her, Maya approached the teacher's desk. "Sit down, dear," Mrs. Patterson said gently, pulling up a chair beside her own. "I wanted to check on how you're doing. I know the past few months have been incredibly difficult." Maya sat carefully, her backpack clutched in her lap. Inside it, the airsoft gun felt heavier than usual, like a secret that was growing too big to contain. "I'm fine," Maya said automatically, the same response she'd been giving adults for months. Mrs. Gould Patterson studied her with kind but knowing eyes. "Maya, I've been teaching military children for 15 years. I know fine is what you tell adults when you don't want them to worry. But I also know that sometimes fine can be covering up a lot of pain and anger." Maya looked down at her hands, unsure how to respond. Mrs. Patterson was one of the few teachers who'd known her mother personally, who'd attended some of the base social events where Priya Singh had charmed everyone with her quick wit and warm laugh. "Your mother was an extraordinary woman, Mrs. Topic," Patterson continued. "I remember watching her at the shooting competitions. How focused and confident she was. She had this presence about her, like she could handle anything that came her way." "She could," Maya whispered. "She was the best at everything she did.